from anybody before I actually start?
I think, yeah, no, that's it.
Is it working?
We're up.
We're perfectly.
We
We're
are.
up.
Okay, good. Hopefully there are no technical issues. Hi everyone, I'm Ollie, incoming RPGs rep for the Society, here tonight to host a segment on RPG design. It will broadly be divided into two parts, one being this, which is the RPG reps roundtable with myself, Sol and Lap going down, and the other being a panel-style discussion with 6 of the Society's game designers who volunteered very kindly to answer some questions and talk about their own experiences. The purpose of the segment really is to drive home the fact that game design is extremely rewarding, and if you have a passion for something, it's a great way of exploring it and sharing it with others. Whether you're interested in making your own adventure in a pre-established system or designing your own system entirely, this is the place that you want to be for that type of discussion. We'll be covering D&D, of course, but we'd like to encourage discussion of other RPG systems and their unique and different concepts. Throughout the segment, I'll try my hardest to pick up questions from the Twitch chat so it feels more interactive. So please do comment. With that being said, let's move on. We'll go down the list. Let's introduce ourselves. Sol, go.
Hi, I'm Sol. If you didn't know, I was RPG rep last year. I play loads of RPGs. I got into it about 7 years ago. Started DMing online, and yeah, I now GM and DM way too often, and fill up all my weeks with it. And today I'm going to be talking to you about my procrastination project of this year, which is, of course, a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition adventure ready to be published, called Gone to Daggerford. And various other things.
Cool. That.
Oh, I am the incoming assistant RPG rep. Currently, my role here is to mainly reflect and bounce off also, and also Ollie here. I will also add in some additional comments and experience when relevant. And hopefully, I should just be lurking within part 2, for it is a stage for other GMs that are much more experienced than me.
Okay, we've just received a donation, so thank you very much for that. It will be processed in due time. I'm sure that somebody can get back to you in the chat on that. For now, I'm going to start by talking about my pet project over the past sort of year, almost a year now, the RWBY Unofficial Tabletop RPG. So if any of you don't know, I'm a RWBY mega fan. And I have all of the stuff, and I've watched the show way too many times. So I thought it'd be a great idea to make my own tabletop game based on it. It's, fast-paced anime involving lots of combat, sort of almost dance fighting, extreme fantasy, and very unique and sort of bold characters, lots of colours. Stuff dashing around the screen. So what I really wanted to reflect when making the game is that sense of urgency, the sense of speed, and of feeling like you're powerful, like you're dashing around the place like a hero. And that balancing of style and realism is something that established systems do really well. And I drew on D&D as sort of a really popular system for inspiration on that. So just going over some of the basics. Obviously, I like to focus quite a decent amount on roleplay, it being a role-playing game. Quite a lot of the characterization is player-driven, because RWBY's characters are so central to the general plot, and just in terms of how everything operates within the world of Remnant, it's extremely individual. I wanted to use a traditional D20 system. The original version of the sort of unofficial tabletop game, if you'd like, that Andrew Diedrich created, that I took inspiration from, used a D10 system. And I thought that was quite intuitive, and it was extremely bold. But what it didn't do is it didn't provide enough variation to be interesting or engaging, and it was also quite complicated. So I tried to make that less complicated, so that I can make all the other stuff more complicated, if that makes any sense. I didn't want to make anything convoluted, as in to make players confused, but I did want to add some complexity to several other of the elements, particularly the combat, which can sometimes be a bit stale in some systems. As sort of outlined on the slide here, I put sort of the main quote there at the bottom. Being a husband huntress isn't about realism, it's about style. Now, if you know, in the show, there's all sorts of things concerning aura and magic and semblances that make all of the combat wacky and unrealistic. So what I didn't want to do is have the gameplay feel stale, like you were moving, slowly, or that you weren't having a hit. I want it to be daring and interesting.
That's rule of cool written straight in.
Rule of cool, straight there. I actually have a system for that, and I'm going to be talking about it right now. This is the rule of cool system. It involves using a D10 or several D10s to boost a roll, based not only on your teamwork, but possibly clever roleplay, good descriptions, or taking bold action. The idea being that you create a pool in the center of the table in which you can add D10s on the GM's discretion, and then take them out again when you want to boost something, when you really want to get something successful. And what that does is it makes impactful moments more impactful, and allows you to get away with crazy stuff. I then put a little bit at the bottom there to do with the background. Obviously, the world of Remnant being relatively big, there's a lot of variation there. What I wanted to do is make it relatively simple for anyone who hadn't watched the show to say, okay, here are the 4 or 5 main places. Come up with a derivative of it. Say there's some random town in sort of the outskirts of Vale that you come from. You can easily say that and take the Vale bonus, and just run with it, instead of having, as perhaps D&D I'll make a comparison to, you would have like acolyte or spy, criminal. It's more wide-reaching in this system. And I feel like that draws more attention to other aspects of the character rather than prescribing certain attributes. Speaking of attributes, the base ones are different. I wanted to have the same number. It works quite well for the derived statistics. But I wanted to have it focus on characteristics that are prevalent in the show, and also ones that make sense with the combat system that I developed. So RWBY's combat is extremely quick. So I wanted to have several of the stats that sort of could be channeled into combat abilities, and can also inform your weapon choice, both of which are quite important. As always, bad stats, always a good thing for roleplay. Don't feel like you have to min-max in this system either. The roleplay aspect is just as important in terms of the narrative and the gameplay as the combat. I focus on the combat mostly because in the game designing, I had to make a lot of mechanics. So it's what takes up the majority of the rules, I guess. So I've tried to display a wide range in this presentation here, and I'll be taking some questions later from the chat if there are any, etc., etc. I'm also planning on doing some stuff with this next term, but I'll explain that afterwards. Moving on, like I talked about, derived attributes. Derived attributes for me are quite important. What I wanted to do with them is make a wider ranging use of them. So, I mean, obviously, because I haven't playtested yet, I'm not entirely sure how it works, and I need to get on that sooner rather than later to narrow it down. Broadly, what I did was I made each derived attribute consisting of 2 base attributes. So instead of picking proficiencies and sort of expertise, you would build your base stats more carefully, and then gain bonuses based on other stuff. But the primary purpose was to ensure that each one could still be viable in a scenario. So you didn't have to go to a place and think, oh, I can't do that one because my stat on it is very low. Instead, you would think, okay, well, maybe if I can use my, if I want to mislead this person, I can use my high endurance to my advantage, even though I don't have as much will. So it's that type of thing. And again, the combat attributes there at the bottom won't actually make that much sense unless you know what all the things are. But I have laid that out in the previous segments. I just didn't feel like I should show it here because it is less to do with the actual design of the game than it is to do with sort of the finicky details of what each thing is. Broadly speaking, dust is a source of energy that can be used in weapons and also can be used to power semblances, which is like your special magic ability in the show. Aura is a central thing, and that's your ability to take and receive, deal out damage. So that works in conjunction with your health. Because of how crazy RWBY's combat is, if you were to just have health, you would be downed in no time. So the aura acts as a shield, as it does in the show. Talking of what happens in the show, I've got some of the combat maneuver outlines here. So obviously there's quite a lot of stuff in here that I've sort of redirected to other pages and said, here, look for this specific thing or that specific thing. I wanted to give the overview just on this page. The key point is that in RWBY, fighting is extremely spectacle based. You want to feel cool while you're doing it. So it felt right to me to give everybody 2 actions. Now,
Nice.
It's quite ambitious, and adding that to the movement, which can be boosted with agility, also means that combat is extremely quick. If you were fighting, low level, a horde of maybe 5 or 6 low level Grim, the basic enemies, it could be over in 1 round of combat. And the purpose of that is not to diminish the value of the enemies, but to boost the players up. And of course, using NPCs who would have similar stats if they were trained could be a way of making a more challenging combat. Also providing an exterior objective that isn't just eliminate this enemy is also encouraged using this system. So maybe you've got a horde of Grim that are attacking a village or attacking a CCT tower or something like that. And your objective as the protectors of Remnant is to protect that objective. And it might not be difficult to kill, 3 or 4 of the attackers, but once you get into the horde and you get into sort of the details, there's some really interesting storytelling you can do through the combat there. And all of the combat should be advancing something. And that's what I feel. So yeah, one of the things that I did that was new and innovative in this system, instead of taking directly from the show, is I invented a new class or race, being the Half Mage. And it has various different iterations. But the key with the Half Mage is that it's very rare and it's very unreliable. So when you want to use an ability, because magic is quite rare, there's an element of risk involved. So any of the abilities that say you can, in the description, have a chance of failure. And that's to encourage careful use of them, and also to discourage everybody from taking them. Because you might be playing a character who's a massive risk taker, who might want to take this. You also might be playing somebody who prefers to hang back, or prefers to have reliability in their actions. So taking this is very volatile, and that offers a load of RP advantages as well as combat advantages. So I hope it will be very interesting. Oh, we've received another donation. Wow, anonymous 7431. Amazing, thank you. We'll get onto that afterwards. I'm sure we've got. I'm sure that if there's a request that we can do that afterwards. Weapon styles here. I've made a list that's not exhaustive. The purpose is to get people thinking about what type of weapon that they'd like. And weapons are obviously very central, not only in terms of actual combat ability, but also when talking about actual like your characterization, and that can be seen in RWBY through different combat styles, talking to different parts of a person's character. So yeah, I didn't really want to talk about that too much, especially because I'm running on time. This is then the finicky part, and probably the bit that will draw the most questions, if there are any. These are actions and they're sort of pivotal in different forms, in different ways. The primary objective of this is to, again, enhance the volatility of the combat, and to say, here I want to deal a finishing blow, or I really need to get away right now. And those two can be very good motivators. And some of them will have prerequisites that you need to fulfill in order to get to the point where you are able to use it. And I really feel with something like that, that you can sort of refine your character even further. It's not just the case of having the combat advantage, it's also how it influences your character and how it influences the narrative. So, with that, I'm probably going to finish the bit where I talk at you, with a couple of minutes to spare. If anyone has questions from the chat, first and foremost, or from either of you two.
Hannah might in a second.
Okay.
I've got some things. I was just wondering, so there's a lot in this. Obviously, you've tried to keep your best to the source material, which is always good. Within game design, you have to kind of try and emulate something via the medium of the rules. Did you borrow, mix from anywhere? Are there any inspirations actually mechanically that you've taken this from?
Yeah, I mean the rule of cool system was originally designed by Andrew Diedrich, who I've put in the sort of inspired by on the front cover, and that of course is one of the not one of the central premises, but one of the mechanics that I most was inspired by in terms of how to make this uniquely RWBY-esque. How do I turn the D20 system, that I wanted to create, into something that is fast-paced, that is slightly more reliable in terms of dice rolls, so you can go in with a level of certainty and confidence and say, this is what I want to do. It can still fail, but it fails in ways that are descriptive rather than, oh, well, you've got 5, it just doesn't work. If you do several things in an action, I escalate the tree, I jump down and I spear the thing in the neck. You could easily fail on any one of those things, but that doesn't mean that the entire action fails or that you don't end up in a situation that is exciting.
And is there any reason you chose the D20 system?
Mainly because it's popular and it's really easy to get the hang of. If you think of what's associated with RPGs, quite often people say, oh, well, here's the set of dice that you use. And I don't use all of the sets of dice, but the D20 it's iconic. It provides the variation that you want to see, and the rule of cool balances it out. I feel with Andrew Diedrich's system, with the D10s, when everything's a D10, it feels a lot more powerful to use. But I feel like I've balanced it slightly more by having the main system be D20 and then the rule of cool still be D10.
Lap, have we got a question from chat?
Yes, we do. Hannah has a question specifically got to do with the half-mage mechanics, and
yes.
she's wondering why you will have a simple failure case of just spell fizzling, rather than include some more additional variety to increase the sense of volatility.
Okay, so that's akin to sort of wild magic, as I understand it. The way of failure can be sort of specific if you want it to be, and DM discretion is a huge part of the system, and I put in sort of the acknowledgements and the intro bit that the rules are meant to be interpreted however you want them to be, and that this is a basis primarily for the mechanics of the game. With the half mage, what I wanted to do was allow there to be a relatively simple mechanic that you can then build on. So if you were playing a game in this system and you wanted to have the failure be something catastrophic, then you can easily do that. Again, what I've intended here is for it to be descriptive rather than prescriptive. So if you wanted to add an element, a more element of volatility, then you could, but you don't have to. So you can take it in any direction you want. If I was running this, I would probably have it miss or not cast correctly, rather than damaging the person who uses it. I feel like because each use of the magic has that chance of failure, a bit like when we played Alien before with the fear dice, is always the chance that nothing happens. You don't want to have something bad happen every single time you use it. Otherwise, then you end up implementing the sort of wild magic card for every single person who uses the class. Whereas you might want to play it differently depending on which GM you're using. So GM discretion is the very simple answer to that one. You can certainly use a wild magic mechanic if you wanted to. I think it's time that we move on to Sol's part, and have any more of the chat questions go on in the background. I can still talk about this in like the second part maybe, if there's time. But I think we should probably move on to give you the right amount of time, because I've gone over by a minute according to my timer.
Before we do that, I just want to point out that the last donation has got us to the next stretch goal, which I believe thematically is perfect because it's designing our own one-page RPG.
Brilliant.
So...
That is thematically brilliant. Thank you. That was anonymous though, wasn't it? Thank you, anonymous.
Yeah.
For that.
Right.
That may be.
Very good.
So, yes, me. Today I'm going to be talking to you about this project that I've been working on over the past, over kind of lockdown this year. Basically, I saw a load of adventures on the DM's Guild, and I went, I could do this better. Without quite understanding how much work it would be. I think I have done it. The bits I wanted to do better. But my gosh, was it a learning experience. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you today about, is how you can go from, all of the types of game design you do at the table and the way you prep for your games, and then actually trying to publish that, how much more of a step that is to actually make something that other people are going to use. So here we can currently see just the title page. And this is what it will look like if I ever actually put it up. It's ready. I just need some more art for the covers. But apart from that, I've many hours have gone into this, and I should really put it out there. So yes, while we're still on the title page, I would like to point out, you can see in the bottom left there under credits, there's more than just me involved, at least credited with this project. I was the main adventure designer and writer, but within that, I ended up also learning, some graphic design. I learned complete layout. Every single thing you see in this, on these pages, it's all me. I did it. I did all the layout. I did all the art. I did all of the textures, the background. I learned a lot, and it took bloody forever.
It's mighty impressive.
And playtesters are also a really important thing when it comes to this, and the editing that comes from that. So if we move on to the next kind of couple of pages,
Gotcha.
When you're kind of designing for this, you'll kind of looking at these pages, you can see that there are quite some parallels with the main adventures that you see from Wizards of the Coast themselves. Yeah, I know, Anakin, playtester. You were the first one. Within the introduction, they always have like this front page, gives you the background, gives you the
Let me know if it's working again.
We're now back.
We're now back.
Okay.
Oh my god, okay, my internet has chosen the worst time to disconnect there for a second. So hopefully,
Absolutely fine.
hopefully
We're
fine.
good.
Let's go.
So welcome to
So
chapter
quick.
1. I've actually managed to fit the entirety of chapter 1 onto one page. So you can see the entirety of chapter 1 here. You have a little introduction. There's a sidebar there for extending it out further. You've got the interaction, and then at the end you can see there you've actually got combat, which likely would happen in here. You've got all of the blue boxes for the text to read out aloud, and I've managed to fit this in here. This took ages to actually fit onto one page, but the fact is it overflowed by only a small amount. So you can actually see here how, in trying to fit this out, I had to cut a load of things, I had to rewrite certain things just so it can fit. So when you're designing to actually publish something and get it in the layout sometimes actually influences what's in there, because you've got to make it look nice, you've got to make it have the right layout and whatnot, and follow the style guides, as I said before, while keeping it as concise and providing all the information that anyone could need. Now, there's a lot of text there, and there was a lot of rewriting. It would probably went on to about 1.5 pages, and this is what it looks like in its posh state, ready for publishing. However, let's have a quick look at what it was in my original notes. Okay, so here you can see my original notes. So I ran this back in term 1 of my time here at university. For Anakin, which is why he is. They are credited as one of the first playtesters. This is my full set of notes for that entire page you've just seen, and I don't know if you can read some of them there, but it is very much what I would be saying in my head. Like, I read it, that's what I'm saying in my head, and I extrapolate a lot from that. Like, combat. There's some lizard folk. I don't even say how many.
Yeah, I think anybody in the chat who DMs regularly will recognize that.
But somehow I've then got to turn that completely unbalanced mess and make it balanced. And so, so you have to go and look again at kind of the guides or whatever, actually play test it and make it match up with what Wizards of the Coast want you to do. But I learned a lot doing that, and especially trying to write it out. The dialogue and explain to the dungeon master, because that's what you've got to do. Is you've always got to be clear, because you're not running it, they're running it, and they need everything they can in order to run the story that's from your head, which makes it greatly different.
And that's going to be a central difference as well between designing a game system and designing a game sort of adventure.
Yeah. The other thing there is you can also see I've had to work out the balance within the system as well. So adjusting the encounter. You don't know what the party's going to be, because it's not your party. You can't. You got to work for all kind of possibilities and give people options, because otherwise, what's the point in your product? The next couple of pages. Copyright. Copyright is huge, and there is a reason why I have made everything in this, and I own everything in this. It's because of copyright. Because as soon as you start trying to license things, it gets very expensive. You have to understand all of the, even this Daggerford map that you can see on here. This is only covered by the Dungeon Master's license, because technically Daggerford exists, right? And I'm using the OGL. No, it's not even the OGL. It is the DM's Guild license that allows me to use Wizards of the Coast and specifically the Sword Coast, kind of the IP of the Forgotten Realms. So I still can only use this map image on the Dungeon Masters Guild. But I still had to make it, because it still has to be mine, right? And I'll get to the problems later. There are some problems I've learnt about the copyright, but for now, it's still mine and I still own it.
I'll pop the next one.
Yeah, the next one is just, again, a shoddy image that I put together at the end just to fill space, realistically. But it still helps, and the whole point of kind of adding in the art effects, making it look nice, as well as making it look nice, is to at least convey to the dungeon master a little bit more of what's going in your head, give them things to use in their games, to as handouts and stuff as well. And actually, you can see on this one, this is actually part of a larger supplement within it. I basically created a whole supplement for the town in the area as a side thing, which is why it's 24 pages long. But we don't need to go into that. It's just important to just show that, you've got to you've got to get on board with either making stuff or paying other people to do it, and paying them well. Let's go to the next thing, actually, because this is where I kind of touch on the dungeon crawl aspect of the adventure. And the reason why I want to bring this one up is if you can actually go to the last one in that, I think it's actually a couple. It's about 3 more slides down.
Ooh, okay, is it with the one with the map in it?
Actually, the one before the map would be
The one
perfect.
before the map. Okay.
Yeah. You can see here, when you're writing the rooms, right? You need a map, but you also need to write them in the same style as what Wizards of the Coast want you to. And whereas the previous ones were a lot of description directly to the Dungeon Master and allowing them to extrapolate, in these kind of sections, it's the Dungeon Master just needs to know mechanics, right? So you have to make sure you're writing the mechanics in the right way and making it very clear what's going on. Meanwhile, you then have to play the Dungeon Master, writing the descriptions of the rooms. And in that bit, I found really rewarding. Trying to, convey the way I describe things to my table and, putting that down on paper to be me at their tables. And I found that really, really actually quite rewarding to get that written down. Lots of editing, though, once again. At the table, you say things once and they pass. You're good. Whereas when you're writing his, it goes through multiple iterations, proofreads, that kind of thing, and make sure you're not just spouting rubbish. So there's loads to actually creating these kind of things. And I think I managed to touch on pretty much all aspects of it. And the final aspects that I did touch on were in the creation of items and mobs, your monsters to use in your games, which is always at the back, as you always find in these kind of adventures. One thing I would say when coming up with these kind of things, a lot of the time you can use what's in the back of the book and kind of copy and paste them, and just to aid in the thing. So on the next page, I think I've got some lizard folk, but more importantly, on these ones, I'm actually providing whoever's buying my product with something useful, because you want something useful out of it. You don't just want another story that you probably could have written yourself. You want them to actually be able to use this for more than just that. Which is why I found it important to come up with new magic items, or at least, similar to other things, but with a slight twist specific to the story, which is why you can see the Ring of Alter Self, the Darts of Poison here. Like, they all kind of exist, but they don't. And in fact, the Ring of Alter Self was a really, really tough one, because you can write a description of a magic item and the mechanics, and you can understand the mechanics at your table perfectly fine, written on a piece of paper. Your players and you have the discussion on how it works. Here, I need it nailed down so that it becomes game legal almost. And so that went through multiple iterations before making it out. And also, of course, needs a little bit of art. And there you go. There's just some final copy and pasting of the official ones in the book, because you need to provide them with some benefits. So would I recommend doing this? I think it's a lot more effort than I expected. Not that I expected. I expected it to be a lot of effort, but it was quite a lot. Okay, we went from writing you saw that page from Google Docs. That's one of the chapters. I probably did 3 more of those kind of pages. It went from that, which was about 1,000 words, to being 13,000 words in the end. And that's just the first write. That's first draft. So plus edits, plus more edits. And then, learning to do the layout, the artwork, and everything within it. It was a lot of effort, but I've actually got something that I can put out there. And that is extremely fun to know.
Yeah, the publishing aspect, obviously, that Sol's touched upon, is absolutely different from what I've been talking about, which is completely unpublished material. Obviously, I couldn't publish it. It's got so much copyrighted stuff in it, you would believe. But yeah, the entire premise of publishing a thing like this, absolutely mind-blowing, especially with all of the stat blocks in the original art, and all of it is very impressive. I think my book ended up being... it has not finished yet, because I haven't added all of the stat blocks yet, but or any of the story, actually. If you wanted to run an adventure, I haven't done any of that yet. But it would be about 60 pages by the time it's done, as like a game book.
And all there is these projects are available. And if you actually want to do this as a thing, these are the kind of projects you will have to work on if you want to make anything from doing, from your hobby. It becomes more than a hobby at that point. Sorry, Lap, what were you going to add?
No worries. You already touched on that point. But it might seem daunting when designing this. Well, in Soul's case, when he's designed this entire adventure and also putting it into a publishable state, it requires many different revisions. However, it doesn't mean that you should stop yourself from even trying just because that it requires a lot of effort. And
sorry, go for it. No, go for it.
And building on top of Ollie's case of designing a system towards RWBY, Ollie didn't start off playing RPGs immediately thought I need to design a custom system for RWBY. And to a lot of GMs, their first start point is to design customization towards their own campaign, and slowly and gradually you develop the skills in order to build your own system, or in Soul's case, publish an entire adventure.
They're all techniques that are all applicable across the board, whether that's writing your own one-page RPG, whether that's, getting to know the systems so well that you can publish adventures, whether it's coming up with your own system based on other systems. I modified the whole of 5th edition in my GCSE year to make Skyrim work in it with a whole new magic system.
I've seen it. It's extensive. But yeah, that's the central premise here, is that we're displaying various different parts of our experience to show that it is accessible and it's fun, but it also comes with its own challenges. So, to finish up, I'm just going to say a quick bit on this. We'll make sure there's any questions left outstanding, and we'll get the panel discussion going. So, sort of interesting news, or good news, I suppose. I will be running playtests and general sort of first release, if it were, not that I'm actually publishing anything, as we've discussed, of the RWBY UT RPG in October for the Society. So if you're around and you are interested in playing it, or if you're interested in proofreading or doing any kind of help with the system, do let me know on the server, or send me a friend request, DM, etc., etc. I do have a server of playtesters and editors who help me design this and eventually play it. So if you're interested, do that. And Sol, I believe if people are sort of want to contact you about Daggerford, then they can do that as well.
Hopefully it'll be on the DMs Guild at some point.
Yeah.
When I actually get around and I'm not busy, because I've also got another one that I need to just lay out, and I'll publish them both at the same time. So
we anticipate seeing it. It'd be very good. Any outstanding questions before we bring the panel in?
I think one thing I just wanted to say is if you want to get involved in anything like this and actually progress to a more professional state, there are so many different things that you can get involved with and kind of make. I know I've insulted Kickstarter for the past weekend, but they do a thing every year in February called Zine Quest, where if you want to take it to the next step, create your own RPG Zine. And put it up there, and they kind of promote it a bit more, and that's something that I am thinking about participating in next year or the next couple of years, if I can get around to that, and lots of other things, itch.io, and all of those kind of things for publishing your own content. It's really good.
Yeah, so we'll do one last check for questions, otherwise we'll get everyone in here for the panel. Anything from the chat?
I don't think I noticed any.
Okay.
In this case.
That's fine. If they come up with anything in the meantime, when we have the panel, I can answer stuff, or Sol can answer stuff, Lap, sort of later on, if necessary. But we'll bring in the panel and have a discussion about that. So let's just, if everyone's listening, I hope everyone's listening from there. Move into the lobby, I guess.
Do we want to hop into there? That's probably
we could hop into there. Yeah, actually, we'll hop into there.
Let's do that.
Let's hop into there. See you in a second. I'll pop the ads up for a second.
Hello.
Okay, so the audio should still be on. I just need to get everyone who wants to have their camera on have their camera on.
Genuinely good image.
And I will pop over the design panel. Here it is. Let's see if is that everybody who wants to or can have their camera on?
I cannot.
You cannot. Okay.
As long as you can hear us. Oh.
Okay. Then I think we should be good to go here. Yes.
Yep.
I'm ready when you are.
All right. So we're now entering the panel discussion. We have guests from the society with a wide range of experience in RPG design and GMing in general. So again, we'll do introductions first, and you can feel free to post questions in the chat. We'll have people look at them and address them in good time. So let's start, I guess, top left and go around. Alex?
So hi, I'm Alex. Well, the systems I've had the most experience with have been storyteller systems by White Wolf and Onyx Path Publishing, as well as some of the 2D20 systems that Modifius uses for their Conan RPG and for the Dune one, which came out recently. Mainly focus on quite sort of storytelling oriented stuff. I've done quite a lot of homebrew for those systems, and I like doing sort of world building based on history, based on mythology, that kind of thing.
Cool. So we'll go across. Elliot?
I'm Elliot. I also do a lot of storyteller systems. I have a tendency I really like the core mechanics, so I have a tendency to use it for games it wasn't really meant to be played for, such as superhero games or Victorian science. But I've played or ran about 30 other systems in my time.
Cool. So we'll move down. Ryan and Tim, who are in the same room.
Hey, I'm Ryan. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for about 4 years now, and DMing for about 3 of those. I dabble in homebrew a lot, and I also enjoy designing things like dungeons and maps.
Hello, I'm Lawful Tim. I've been playing D&D for about 5 years and DMing for about 4 years. I haven't tried very many other systems yet, but will be branching out in the next year. I write quite a lot of homebrew tools for D&D 5e, started by modifying Curse of Strahd, which was my first campaign, and that's about it for me. So.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't introduce myself in terms of systems, so I can go for that. I'm a huge Free League fanboy as of this year and own most of their systems now because they are addictive. But as well as that, I've run lots of different systems in the past, indie systems such as 10 Candles, that kind of thing. Blades in the Dark is one of my other favourites. I've touched on kind of the Edge of the Empire and the narrative storytelling dice of those systems. I've played a lot of systems and a lot of D&D.
Yeah, and hopefully we should be getting Alien for the Society, because now I've run that as well. So me and Sol have both run that, and I really hope I can run it with people in the Society as well, because it's very fun, and it's very short as well, which is brilliant. Let's go around then. Hang on, Ryan and Tim there. So Raylan?
Yes, hello. Yes, I'm Raylan. I've played various RPGs for over 7 years. I have extensive experience in DMing a D&D, mostly homebrew, for 6 years. I've also played on and off Call of Cthulhu. I've dabbled in some other RPGs and writing my own, but my main thing is in heavily modified D&D, 5th edition.
Awesome. So we'll start off with general questions, and as we go along, people from the chat might input at a certain point. I have accounted for that. So we'll start with what type of RPG do you enjoy running and designing, and why? So we've touched upon a few specialisms, so let's get to the reasoning behind those. Again, we'll go around same order.
So I've already mentioned that I tend to prefer sort of story-focused RPGs rather than very combat-heavy ones like D&D. Um, I I've done a lot of stuff with sort of sandbox type campaigns that it knows well, and yeah, um, yeah.
Fair enough. Let's move across, Elliot.
This is going to be probably me trying not to just say what Alex said. I also like to say I don't run a lot of combat. I once run a game where the only combat was snowball fight. I tend to run games focused around discovery, relationships, or investigation. That's me.
Cool. Tim and Ryan.
Yeah, I tend to run quite a lot of combats for 5th edition because that's what most of the rules are focused around. And I mostly enjoy running like singular, large, climactic encounters versus like the whole idea of just like, here's 3 goblins, here's 3 more goblins. But other than that, yeah, I like the whole sort of exploring sort of wide areas and different cultures.
I don't think I've played enough or GM'd enough to know quite what my preferred styles are.
Which is valid.
Yep. I started with one of the pre-prepared modules from Wizards of the Coast, Curse of Strahd. I found I had to modify that quite a lot to suit my preferences. Ryan's nodding, he was one of my players, and has since run the module. I have since been running a rather large-scale game where the players build up a base, and that's delved into all sorts of politics, large-scale battles with some dungeon delves and similar in the midst. I've enjoyed that more than the module, but and it's let me try out a number of things.
Okay, we'll move across. Thank you for that.
Oh, me?
If you want to, or you can pass.
Yeah,
it
no, I've run loads. I've experimented with loads of different types over the years. What I've learned is I like grit. I like a story that is believable. I want to ground myself in the world. So even if it's fantasy, even if it's high fantasy, I still make it a little bit more low and a little bit more gritty. I want that kind of storytelling. And how that relates to kind of the different systems that I run. Most systems, I think you can translate into other things. A lot of the Free League systems are narrative first, which I absolutely love because storytelling and cinematics are the best fun at the table, especially for that kind of grittiness. But as a mix to that, like getting a little bit more crunch of like D&D or some OSR also works really nicely to set that tone.
Yep. Thank you. Yep.
My personal preference, I like running campaigns and RPGs where there's freedom for players to feel out their character, able to turn like what they've written down into a fully living, breathing person, and making sure that they have the tools to interact with the world in the way they want to. In general, I like to take that and then lead it into, as the game goes on, theme-heavy games, where the group is, in a way, tackling theme things like corruption or fanaticism. I tend to think I've done a good campaign if I can summarize the story like a old legend.
Nice. Yeah, I could really resonate with several of those points. In terms of my own, I guess I'll just briefly summarize. I've been undertaking a somewhat ambitious, not particularly ambitious project to unite quite a lot of my homebrew into one universe, and that lends itself to several narrative hooks, but also problems. So I'm happy to talk about those. And recently, having run Alien, that's a great system, and I love that. It's in very high contrast to what I was just talking about in the roundtable with RWBY, being a very fast-paced and less gritty, I suppose, system. Both of them I love. So, yeah. We'll move on then. Are there any questions in the chat so far, or should we move on to the second one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so we'll go to what inspired you to start designing and creating RPG content?
Shall I start again, or?
Yeah, I feel like that's best. We'll
Yeah?
keep going.
Okay, yeah. When I got into RPGs almost at the very start, I kind of ended up wandering into the Onyx Path forums, and there was a lot of sort of homebrew going on there. So that's kind of where I can trace it back to. Um, I got involved with a couple of sort of projects that a few people were working on there before I really understood anything, and I learned a fair bit from that. But yeah,
A lot of constructive criticism, I'm guessing.
I'm not sure that's the way I'd describe it, but like I encountered problems which I know that those problems exist now. But yeah, it was apart from that, and the because the systems which I was sort of involved with at that point they're quite sort of modular, where there's this sort of base system and then sort of sub games set onto that. So you've got this base system, and then there's like the rules for playing vampires and the rules for playing werewolves, and there's a bunch of people who kind of make new subsets of that. They call them splats. I kind of got into that to begin with, but then later on, as I sort of started running my own games, frankly, I started running into sort of various janky and slightly broken parts of systems, and my sense of sort of, if you want it done right, do it yourself, kind of kicked in, and I ended up. I have built a few tottering towers of homebrew, trying to fix systems like that, to mixed effect, but yeah.
Yeah, and on the other end of that spectrum, when you're designing a game system, you've got to keep in mind that whatever you sort of write down is to be interpreted in whatever way possible by the GM who's going to be running it, who may or may not take your rules in a completely different direction than you intended. So I like to emphasize in whatever I'm writing that it's not an exhaustive list, and it should never be sort of entirely prescriptive, and that you're free to interpret the mechanics in whatever way suits how you're telling the story. At the end of the day, it's designed for everyone to have fun, and if you have to tweak it, if something's slightly botched in order to make it better and more fun for the group, then you do, and it's perfectly fine to do that. So move around.
So it mostly comes down to impulse decisions that I'm going to run a certain type of game. One of the worst examples of this having been, we watched a movie about puppies, and I decided I was going to run World of Darkness puppies a week later, which was an experience.
That sounds amazing.
That's a Chad move.
But
I want to play that now.
I think the first one my gateway into it was a long time ago, when Tabletop Society had far worse of a role-playing sort of group. I turned up to the intro to role-playing session, and there were 4 people there, none of which GM'd. And I was like, I know, I'll print off the World of Darkness character sheets and run a game just using the character sheets. And it sort of spiraled from there, because I hadn't planned this out, and I sort of was slowly trying to build up the system to explain that I was using Goa Uld as the main splat. So yes, I make impulse decisions and then have to build a system to support that.
That's one way of doing it. Let's move around. Yeah, Tim, right?
Sure, you go first now.
Okay. So I started by trying to patch up flaws in D&D 5th edition, both in the core rules and in the modules. So things like tool proficiencies, which can be a bit all over the place, differences in power levels of the races. I have personal gripes with some of the spells, and of course Curse of Strahd has many what I consider to be plot holes.
There's a whole community around patching up Curse of Strahd online that is probably one of the most thorough resources for that kind of thing I've ever seen. The subreddit r/Curse of Strahd has So much really good content.
They did the same for Dragon Heist as well.
Yeah,
Dragon
Reddit-
Heist is the other one that's really good at for the community to patch it up.
Reddit is also an
homebrew
extremely useful thing in general. I've found map creators via it. I tried to stream D&D a while ago. It failed for several reasons, but none of them were maps, because quite a lot of the creators are quite happy to let you use the maps. And there's several map packs or expansion bits that you can add on to your games, and it's brilliant. It's just a good resource.
So how I got into kind of homebrewing stuff? Well, it's all kind of because I got D&D wrong. If you try and learn Dungeons and Dragons, if you're the first person, because I bought it when it came out, 5th edition, I was like, cool, I have no one to play with, so I'm going to have to learn the rules, I'm going to have to be a DM, and even then I went, I don't really understand all of these adventures, so I'm just going to run my own one-shot. And what else do I want in that one shot? I want necromancers to be a big part of it. There's no bloody necromancers in 5th edition, so I just went, fuck it, I'm going to homebrew them. And I haven't even played the game yet. I don't even know fully how it works. I just know you've got to roll a dice and add some things. So I ran my first adventure with some necromancers. It went well. Most of it was spent in the bar having a bar fight, but it was great fun. And then kept going with the old homebrew adventures and homebrew one-shots, because I know I picked up Lamop, and as in Lost Minds of the Fandelver, and I just went, how do I run this? I don't know what the game is. I don't know how the plot works. I threw it out the window and genuinely ignored Wizards of the Coast for 6 years. It is only this year or last year that I finally got around to actually reading the rules properly.
I don't think I've fully read the rules yet, even.
I'm saying this now, reading the rules properly and running modules and stuff, and trying to get rules as written correct. And it has been a fun journey just attempting it, because my god, do some combats feel awful, and some other things just you go, Wizards, why have you written this? So yeah, it's mainly despair at Wizards that got me into it. I
think a lot of us started with homebrew D&D, honestly. I
do find though that I used to think D&D was all it was, and then when I would try to run other systems, when I wanted to run other settings, I did find myself, rather than trying to modify D&D to play it, as I would have used to, because that's a complex system, trying to copy it across to any other setting without help is an absolute nightmare. Skyrim. But apart from that, I always found that getting systems designed for those settings tends to work better, because they've been built from the ground up.
Yeah.
Really?
So what started me on homebrewing and designing my own things is during the 1 year while I was being a player quite consistently, and the many more where I was a DM, I felt like I was being constricted by the rules of 5th edition, rather than having them. Some of them did help, but a lot of them felt not like the tools they're meant to be to tell a story, far more dictating what the story must be. These like general stereotypes you get in D&D ideas. I find those very restricting, and I didn't like that. I didn't like that being what the story would be and not allowing it to evolve naturally. I wanted to integrate some themes I found didn't fit into D&D, especially Forgotten Realms, and how I could do those in a way which was interesting, was both pleasing to me and I think interesting to the players. On top of that, creating worlds where the idea of a typical paladin or typical bard isn't a worldwide stereotype in the world itself, and players can be any sort of person they want to be with any character, with any class. And I wanted to make sure that would still be there in a world where that makes sense.
Yeah.
On top of that, also driven by spite, because I have strong opinions on some monsters in D&D, like Medusa or Gorgons.
Yeah, that certainly isn't the step of Gorgons. Yeah.
Again, respectable.
Yeah. So
we have a question.
We do, brilliant.
For all, and this is from James Aderam. Favorite thing from real history, whatever game bonus had a lead mechanism used.
Okay, hang on. You'll have to repeat that because I think the stream just lagged out at exactly the wrong time.
Oh, no.
At least my internet did.
Real history or folklore or whatever you've run in a game, like your favorite thing. Real history, folklore, whatever you've run in a game. Bonus points if it had a neat mechanic in the system you used.
I might have a good one for this, if I may start.
Yeah, go for it.
I've run sort of like a Wendigo type mechanic before. So I guess you could count that within folklore. But one of my favourite things to do when I run a D&D campaign is homebrew monsters. Homebrewing spells, homebrewing items is cool, but I really like homebrewing monsters. And it's quite difficult, but usually because I've had enough experience running combat, I can make it relatively balanced. But it's entirely dependent on sort of the party. So quite often I will use a monster just for a specific campaign, and if you were to try and take it out or publish it, it wouldn't work because it only works in the context. But the way I ran that was totem based. So I don't know if anyone's played or seen Until Dawn, but I took some inspiration from that and sort of merged the two concepts and decided it would be a cool idea to have cursed totems that could essentially warp people over a period of time into a Wendigo of various descriptions. So there are 3 different types. And the way I used that is I basically just engineered my own stat blocks and sort of stages. And the only other time I've encountered stages like that of sort of development of the monster has been in the Alien RPG. And I won't go into detail on that because it is essentially spoilers for one of the cinematics. But I really enjoyed that as well. I won't take up any more time. Anybody else got an answer to that question?
I had like a boss of a major arc that was incredibly tangentially based off of Santa Claus, but it eventually sort of morphed into this sort of artificer sort of boss in like a frozen castle, like a robot army, and I somehow got that from Santa Claus.
Very metal.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very metal.
If I may go next, in one of my, in the same setting as the campaign that's led on for quite a while in my games, at the very beginning I tried my best to incorporate the Wild Hunt into my setting in a way that I felt brought in, as I don't know, the themes I wanted it to, and keeping it within some of the pure views of the original ideas and myths. And the idea being that of this new continent where the new human colonies were, they had no idea of the experience of the Wild Hunt constantly being warned by natives, which they disregarded, and how that led into the different parts of disrespect and culture. And when it finally came the way, almost semi-apocalyptic event to the players who had no idea what was going on, because they quite actively didn't search it out. And I thought that was very cool and interesting. I tried my best to incorporate the idea of, in a lot of myths of the Wild Hunt, you get inside and get out of its way. And what would happen if you didn't do that? And to the different NPCs who wouldn't do that.
Cool. We got a donation in for £3 from RG, I think, again. So we'll get onto that at some point. I'm assuming it's an interlude request, so I'm sure that will be dealt with. Yeah, we're reaching up now further than 1,500. That's mental. So thanks everyone again for donating. We'll move on to the next question that I have prepared, unless there's any more from the chat.
Nope.
All right. So we've already been talking about sort of crazy or complex things, so I think we should move on in the interest of time and go for how should mechanics inform storytelling?
That's a pretty wide question.
It's just because I had some ideas for that to kind of narrow down on one section of it, and then sort of someone else could sort of take other sections.
Yeah,
but
very
like
good.
Sort of focusing on sort of powers available to players, like when you're coming up with them, whether that's in the form of magic items, whether it's in the form of like new class or whatever other means for gaining power that players have. Of course, it's very important to consider mechanical balance, like is this overpowered, underpowered, so no one would ever take it. But it's also important on a narrative level to think about the implications of power in a story. So to take a simple example here, like imagine you have a group who are like delving into a dungeon and they're going in there to go find treasures and things. There's a massive difference if like they go in there and they find great riches and they have a bag of holding or some other means of like storing those riches so they can carry it themselves, versus if they don't, because if they don't, they have to go get a donkey to carry it, or they have to like have porters, and that sort of that can, on one hand, that can act to sort of bind them into the world to a degree. If you don't give them sort of a means to carry their stuff, on the other hand, it can also slow down sort of the pacing and cause sort of issues that aren't interesting to resolve potentially, depending on what you choose to do. There would very much depend on like what kind of game are you playing. If you're playing a traditional sort of dungeon delving thing, you might want to give them the bag of holding. If the players are like sort of employed by a company who sort of sent people along with them to carry their stuff, that's a very different adventure. And that kind of thing is interesting to consider. On another level, there's what powers can say about a character. One of my favorite ever powers in sort of RPGs in general is a thing from the second edition of Exalted. It's a power that a character can gain called Freedom Let's Go, and it basically lets you take an intimacy, which is sort of a mechanical representation of how your character feels about something. So like their connection to a loved one, to an enemy, that they like apples. And Freedom Let's Go lets you basically spend some magic to just say, I don't care about that anymore, which is useful for sort of social influence gameplay. But it also says something really potent about the character, that like no matter how connected they are to someone, one day they could just say, I don't care anymore.
Wow.
And that's something you have to handle carefully, but it is a very interesting character statement that character has chosen to learn to do that.
Has anyone else got thoughts on that question about mechanics and storytelling? Yeah, Elliot?
Sure.
So what I want to talk about is why the system impacts the narrative. And to talk about this, I'm going to talk about the difference between hard and soft skills. Hard skills are skills that the players or the GM has. And soft skills are those that the characters have. And this comes in, it's sort of really evident in LARP, but it also is apparent in role-playing. When you're sort of in a scene about conversation, and you suddenly have the issue that one of your players is fundamentally socially awkward, they struggle with interpersonal communication, but their character might be amazing at it. Or you're playing an investigative game, and your character might be Sherlock Holmes, but you haven't, as a player, got the skills to necessarily ask the right questions. Having mechanical structure to something you want to base your game around gives the players tools that the characters have accessible to the players. A good system for investigation will give Sherlock Holmes a bunch of options like, oh yes, I'll question the witness, I'll look for clues we've missed, which will give them mechanical prompts even if players going, I don't know, the room's locked, how did someone get in? And yeah, if you want your game to focus on something, there should be tools in the system to help the players with that.
Yeah.
For an example for what you're talking about there, Elliot, are you thinking of like the say the aura reading thing in World of Darkness, where it's like you have sort of what is like it essentially lets you ask certain questions. So it's like, what is this person feeling? Are they being truthful? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is that?
Okay, let's. Has anyone else got anything on this?
Yeah, I've got a counter to that. There's a lot of systems that I've been playing where like powers and that kind of thing don't really come into play. Because they're more like you're playing realistic systems, right? You're playing in what is considered real life, right? Alien, you're just a person in space. Twilight 2000, you're just a soldier on post-apocalyptic Poland. If you play Tales from the Loop, you're just a kid, right? And in all of these kind of things, you don't have any features, you don't have any powers that you can use. You just have you, whatever you've got on you, and 12 skills. And those 12 skills, they sort for everything. And there's the mechanics behind, how to do rolls. But in those games, you roll, or you should. I think Aliens are slight separate from that, but you should roll less, right? You as a human can do anything that you as a human should be able to do, right? Or a human could do in those instances. And but where it changes, rather than having powers, it's all about what you have, right? So with Twilight, it's what gun do you have in your hand? Alien, it's basically, are you in the wrong room at the wrong time?
Back on that actually.
Yeah, go for it.
Just briefly because of time.
What I'm sort of saying is those sort of systems are really heavy on what you as a player can do, your hard skills.
Yes.
Whereas you don't necessarily need powers for supernatural talents. It's giving like these are the skills that a character has.
Yeah.
I might not have the hard skills of being a doctor, but I might want to play a doctor, and it might be giving the player a framework for it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And in this case, all they do is they simplify it down to those 12 skills and what you've got.
But that still requires a bit of ingenuity on the side of the players and the DM, which is not necessarily
which is not ideal.
It's just a different way of doing things.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just like you don't even have to necessarily run all of these games to get an idea of where mechanics can go. You can just sort of like read through the rule book and like just get an idea of like how certain games approach certain things. Like I've read the rule book for a role-playing system called 10 Candles. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but it's a horror game about people at the end of the world. Like it's not like you're fighting the end of the world. It's over. Like the stars have gone out, the sun has been extinguished, and like
they will come in 10 days.
Yes, they will come in 10 days, and the core conceit of the system is you have 10 physical candles in front of you, and they suggest having it as the only source of light in the room, which isn't necessarily like a good idea, but if you want to go for the full experience, do it.
Very cool if you do that.
Yes, it is pretty cool. And anytime a candle goes out for any reason, like it could just be the hand of God, the scene ends and you just keep going. And once all the candles are out, that's the end of your characters. And just reading through the book gives you an idea of just how harrowing an experience it could be under like the hand of a good GM. And it really helps build your appreciation of role-playing games as a medium.
Sounds really interesting, actually. I'll probably look into that. If we got, in the interest of time, because I understand that we've only got about 12 minutes left, I'd like to take any questions from the chat outstanding, and then do the final general question.
Cool. Question, Artemis. Does anyone have any examples of when a player brought you an idea for your character for their character that significantly impacted an element of world building or mechanics you had already prepared? And how did you implement that?
Yes.
Absolutely, amazingly. One of my players for my main campaign that I finished a couple months ago, that I've been running for over a year. At the very start, introduced me to sort of various different deity type things, and being very new to GMing and D&D as I wasn't aware of the Raven Queen. Now that interaction and how well written their backstory was basically made me look into it, and a significant element of my world building for that campaign led to one of the main factions having that as sort of their token religion for a number of reasons. And that influenced various different aspects of the storytelling based on sort of religious sites on the continent, or NPCs that they would interact with who'd perhaps had similar experiences to that character, and the way they, it's the same person that introduced me to D&D. Hi Alex, if you're here, different Alex. Just several aspects of that character, particularly the religious part, influenced my world building for that game, and now sort of expanded into that universe. Very cool.
Yeah. So I had another one. I had a player in a campaign, my favorite campaign I've ever run. At the very beginning, he played a very much so joke character of just being Elvis Presley. Who was a warlock who was, in modern terms, bonked to horny jail by an angel and became Pact of the Celestial, whatever it's called. As the game went on and the other characters got more serious and the tones as such got more serious, he wanted to play a very different person. And so he came to me with this idea of a character who was this sort of scandalous, charismatic dickhead, it wasn't just a case of being forced to do it, who had a genuine crisis of faith and found himself believing in gods that were considered heretical in the real place they're living in, and an idea of how divinity worked. And as the game went on, it gelled very, very well with how I had written my gods to be in the setting. And he was very, very to make sure had developed. And even to this day, because of his character and his insistence on being part of the world building as his character got more and more powerful, that idea of what he had is now one of the dominant religions in my setting, as it simply is a belief that all gods come from people, or from mortal beings, and that does not make them any less worthy of worship. And that was something which he created and has spanned my entire setting, and I find it incredible and fascinating.
Awesome.
From Elvis Presley.
Yeah. Well, amazing how characters develop like that over the course of a campaign. We'll just take maybe one more answer on that, and then move on.
No, I think we answered that.
We good? Okay.
I could probably think answer that. I wanted to get onto the next question because I have big points on that.
Oh, hang on. Was there another one in the chat?
But we'll get to Benji's at the end if we have time. Because I think the next one is slightly more important. Sorry, Benji, love you.
Well, we're happy to answer. I mean, it's from Benji. We can answer it after the stream if we wanted to. Just post it again in like the exec chat or something. We'll just answer it afterwards. I want to get onto this one. We only have 7 minutes, so apologies. What advice would you give for beginner GMs and content creators?
Physical notes. So this is all the notes I had on a dungeon that took the parties on like 2 or 3 campaigns. That'd be a hell of a dungeon. 2 or 3 sessions to go through. And when I was trying to think it up, like my original plan was to make the physical map and figure out the dungeon as I was making the physical map on not the physical map, but I was like making it digitally because I'm playing online at the moment. And that was such a bad way of doing it. Like, it was like me trying to draw, paint a painting from the top down like a printer. It was instead I threw out what I had, and then I started just physically writing down notes. That's probably the cat is way too bright, but
we can see at least some of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it's just a bunch of circles connected by lines, but that's all you really need to start with. And then I filled it in with so there's this system online called the 5-room dungeon, which is just if you just look up 5-room dungeon on Google, it's just a design philosophy of making dungeons where you have a room that's the entrance, why has nobody been here before, like a puzzle or role-playing counter, what was it? Your big climactic boss fight, some kind of twist, like something that changes like the context of the place you're in. Like, so if you were doing like a bank heist, something like, oh, I don't know, turns out somebody else was trying to rob the bank at the same time, and now you're face to face. That's a good thing. And then there's like a setback where like it's like you're whoops, I pulled the wrong lever and now I'm in the dungeons or something. So yeah, so that's the 5-room dungeon, and really between that and just my blobs, and then like some text notes, that's all I really needed to like set the groundwork for like 2 or 3 sessions worth of stuff. And I found that the act of physically drawing out the notes kind of helps me. I don't know if that's just like a thing particular to me, but I felt like I could get further faster by just literally just writing things down.
I get that too.
Okay, cool. So it's not just me. That was my hint. Sorry if I took up too much time with that.
That's fine. I tend to write notes when I'm playing and type notes when I'm DMing, mostly because I want to be able to reread the stuff. I want other people to be able to read things that I create, whereas things that I note for myself, I can do in my own handwriting. Plus, there's a lot less volume. So it depends, obviously, on each individual person. But it's definitely a good suggestion, and it's best to just try out what you think's best for you, because you'll find that you may or may not have a better time writing than typing, depending on the different circumstances. So let's go around. Anyone else on that?
Yes, I have a piece of advice that I think has helped me quite a bit, and I think is a good thing to take, and which can get some people out of some traps I find a lot of new DMs have, which is to be a dirty little thief. Like, if you want something, take it, if you're building your world, because originality is good, of course, but originality isn't inherently bad, and you could do things with stuff that you don't own. And it's simply a case of if new ideas are not necessarily original, it's simply what you're doing with them. The only thing would be, do take things with a purpose to a degree if it's important, but even smaller things, like I included a haberdashery in one of my small towns simply because I watched a video on how haberdasheries work. And some small things like that can really help to sort of sell the world as just as passing things. No, and beyond that, if you like something and you think you can include it, and you think you've got a good reason to, take it. Be a thief.
Yeah, I mean, as I discussed earlier in my sort of bit on the RWBY RPG, the rule of cool dice system was interpreted, I guess. Primarily, I stole the idea of using the D10s as the pool in the middle. I added extra restrictions and made it balanced within my system, but that was essentially a major inspiration for when I started the entire project. So you can take that even further and say, not just stuff that exists to supplement existing systems, but stuff that, you just expand it. It's brilliant. Go.
I think Alex has a really good point now to be made.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, I had a few different sort of points to make. So, first one is for anyone who's really doing anything with RPGs, like DMs and players and homebrewers and anything. Like, above all, make sure everyone is on the same page. Like, make sure people know what they're getting into as far as you can if you're running like an investigative game or a horror game or that kind of thing. Just talk to one another, for God's sake.
Definitely.
Number one advice. Yes.
But just to quickly add, like, don't solve out of character problems in character. If somebody's upsetting you in the game, don't try to like know the character. Talk to them. They're right there.
Second thing, just sort of backing up Raiden, like, always sort of be on the lookout for things you can steal, borrow, whatever. It's almost always worth it to like go and look and find out where people are talking about it. Reddit is good for this. Like the forums for publishers also usually good. Like, don't necessarily go along with whatever the hive mind there is doing, but it's good to see what other people are doing, and just let that shape your thoughts a little bit. Better to be aware of it than not. And then finally, for homebrewers especially, when you can sort of centralize mechanics, make them as simple as you can to achieve the results you want, and basically just intuitiveness is very rarely a bad thing. If it feels good, and it doesn't break the game, it probably is good.
Yeah.
I am sensitive to the time, but I would do have one quickly thing to back up Alex's first point. I think is a very good thing to know.
I've got one quick roundup as well, if you want.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I think, so in my world, I do run a thing of politics and a thing of what I'd call real ideas. There's prejudice, there's awful things happening, but not everyone wants that in their campaign, and that's fine. And I don't have to include it. I find one thing that can help a lot at the start of the campaign is asking the players, hey, are you comfortable with X, Y, and Z of themes that might come up in the game? If they say no, it doesn't come up.
Yep. So, if something comes up in a game which you're not comfortable with, even if it wasn't discussed at the start, say that out of character, so people can move on.
Definitely, communication.
Make sure people are aware of these things. Yeah, I had a case recently. Somebody brought to my attention in one of my games that they wanted a direction. They wanted stuff sort of laid out in a way that I hadn't laid it out previously, and I think I could have done a better job when I set up that game, describing exactly what I wanted to do. So this kind of discussion resonates with me, and I feel like I can take that forward. Sol, last bit. I'll do a closing, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. My greatest advice to people who, perhaps not even new GMs, perhaps people wanting to GM, do it. Just go. Have fun.
Yes.
No one's going to get anything wrong. As I said, I literally homebrewed my first one without even knowing how to play.
Yes.
And here I am. It's great.
Join the collective. We're all
Yes.
My
bullshitting
second
here.
point, and this is also...
None of us know how to do it.
adding to the stealing front, play
Yes.
other RPGs if you can. Because so many other RPGs
Yes.
have so many different types of game mechanics. Play board games, you can steal from them too. We're playing tabletop here. War games, you can steal from them too. In fact, there's a reason why there are similar mechanics, because they come from one another. But yeah, honestly, just have fun with them. Tell the stories you want to tell. Find the systems you like to play. And find the players who want to play them. Enjoy.
Very inspirational.
There
Love
you
it.
go.
Yeah, I'll just close off by saying thank you to everybody on the panel for your time and well thought out answers to those questions. I know we had limited time and discussion periods to prepare, so I'm very happy with how it's gone. I'd like to thank everybody in the chat for attending and everybody who donated as well over the course of our stream and all the other streams. We've raised a hell of a lot of money for charity, so brilliant. If anyone's got questions regarding RPG design or any of the things that have been presented today, please do message us on the Discord server and ask us about it, because I'm sure most of us will be happy to talk about it. So yeah, I guess we'll roll over to the ad screen and we'll say goodbye, and then message to see if we can get, I think there's an interlude and then chess, and I will be involved in that as well.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Been moderated.
Be
Don't
safe.
break the
Steal.
universe with paradoxes.